You're listening to the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today is part one of an interview I did with Dr. Carron Silva of Forgiveness is for You. Are you a Catholic wife grappling with challenging in-laws? The Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast is your sanctuary for navigating the sometimes stormy seas of life with toxic in-laws while being validated for what you've experienced. Join me, your host, Miriam Susan, a Catholic wife who's weathered 3 decades of in-law drama, as we tackle the tough issues you're dealing with head on. Hi, welcome to this week's episode of the Catholic Wives with Toxic In-Laws podcast. Today is a bit different because I am featuring an interview that I did and I recorded with Dr. Carron Silva of the Forgiveness is for You podcast. It was such a blessing and such an honor to be asked to be on her podcast. And in this part one of my interview with her, you'll hear some of my backstory, a little bit different version than you may have heard from the very first episode of this podcast. And in the second part, which will be coming out next week, I talk a little bit about forgiveness and how I have come to fully and completely forgive my in-laws for all of the chaos, all of the trauma, all of the things that they have done in our lives. And so with that, I want to bring this podcast on, and I hope that you will tune in next week to hear the second half. It was very difficult for my husband when it came to those situations where it was like he had to choose between his parents or me.
Hello, Forgiver. This week's episode is part one of a 2-part series of an interview about the extent to which a mother will go to remain part of a son's life. In Matthew 10, verses 34 through 36, Jesus states, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a person's enemies will be those of his own household." Of course, Jesus was referring to Jews who would choose to leave the Jewish tradition and follow him in what was known as the Way later. But I couldn't help but think about this passage while listening to my guest, Miriam Susan. Miriam illustrates how this passage can be so easily applied when it comes to relationships within families. The question is, how does one walk in the way of Jesus when those who are closest to us fail to respect our inherent dignity as unique, unrepeatable, indispensable creations in the image and likeness of God? What if we marry into a family that fails to adhere to these words in Genesis 2, verse 24? And I quote, "That is why a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and the two of them become one body." Before we head into this interview, I'd like to thank everyone who has written a review or shared this podcast with others. If you haven't done so yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and write a brief review. The more people write reviews, the more this podcast will be discovered, and the more the world will become a little more forgiving. So get ready to listen, and I'll meet you on the other side of the intro. Hello, Forgiver. Welcome to the Forgiveness is for You podcast. I'm Dr. Carron Silva, forgiveness guide and Catholic mindset coach. I've spent 30 years in therapy for sexual, physical, emotional, and racial trauma, but therapy could only take me so far. I believe that there's freedom in forgiveness, but we cannot do it alone. Do you struggle forgiving yourself or others? Are you ashamed of what happened to you in the past? Do you harbor unforgiveness toward the adults who were supposed to protect you but didn't? Do you resent a whole class of people because you were discriminated against? On this podcast, we talk about all things forgiveness, what it is, what it's not, and how you can begin to forgive yourself, others, and God. Allow me to be your forgiveness guide. Let's begin. Friends, I'd like to welcome to the Forgiveness is for You podcast Miriam Susan, mother of 6 and Catholic convert, who has spent nearly 3 decades navigating the physical and emotional trauma caused by toxic in laws. Drawing from her ongoing healing journey, she hosts the Catholic Wives Desiring Peace podcast, where faith serves as the foundation for enforcing healthy boundaries. Through personal experiences and insights, she creates a space where Catholic wives with challenging in laws feel validated and understood. Miriam Susan empowers women to charitably protect themselves and their families from controlling in laws while honoring their Catholic values, a path she knows from lived experience. Welcome, Miriam Susan. I am so happy that you are here because I think this is a very common experience for many, but not often talked about.
Yes. So thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here to share a bit of my story to help somebody else that's in a similar situation.
Yeah, so do you want to begin at the beginning?
Wow. So, well, gosh, the beginning, so my husband and I met in college, and we were both in towns that were away from our families. And here I come strolling onto the scene. And I was a brand new Christian. I was not Catholic at that point. I was a brand new Christian, and I was unknown to his family. And as a mom now with older kids, I can kind of understand a little bit of that feeling. But there were red flags from the very beginning. I remember when we were dating, my husband confided in me that his mom had read his journal. Okay, so he's a 21-year-old man at this point, and his mom is reading his journal where he keeps his, most private thoughts. And when she found out that he was kind of serious about me, she started throwing accusations of, you just want to marry her because, you're sleeping together. Well, that was not true. Praise God. We were able to be pure on the time that at the time that we got married. But there were just lots of little things like that came up in the very beginning. And then when we got married, things kind of tapered off a little bit. And when the children started coming along, it was okay also for a while. But there were always just an uneasiness that I didn't have words for. This is back, we got married in 1996. So there weren't words like we have now. I didn't know what gaslighting was. I knew what manipulation, I knew what control felt like. But, narcissist, no, that was like, some folk tale that you heard about in English class, but I was a science major, so I didn't really pay that much attention to that. And then things really started to come to a head when we got out of the military. My husband was a military man and he got out in 2006. And at that point, we decided to move closer to his family. That was something that he had always dreamed about, something that was very attractive to me when we were dating was that he was so close to his family. But what I didn't realize is that closeness was actually enmeshment. And so we get to, where his family lived. We were just about an hour away. And there were all these expectations that all of a sudden were on our backs. So we were expected to go to their church. We were expected to go to their homeschool group because my mother-in-law was homeschooling my husband's two adopted younger sisters. And we were expected to go to every family gathering. At Christmas time, we were expected to go to, 3 or 4 houses on Christmas Eve, and then again, 3 or 4 houses the next day. And it was like our lives were not our own. And then things took a turn for the worst. My sister-in-law needed some help. That's a whole nother story. But she ended up living with us for a time. And that was when it seemed like the gloves came off with my mother-in-law. Things got so bad where my mother-in-law was calling my husband, yelling and screaming at him for hours every single day. And at this time, we had 5 children, and the oldest was 10. So, stair step, little kids. My husband wasn't hardly able to work because of his mom calling all the time. I was having a difficult time just because I had 5 kids, 10 and under, homeschooling, and seeing my husband truly suffering through all of this. I mean, he developed alopecia where he had this bald spot on the back of his head. And then it became another bald spot on the back of his head. And it just got to the point where we thought, we have to get out of here. We have to move. We have to go somewhere else just so we can breathe. We put our house up for sale on Craigslist. This was way back when people actually used Craigslist on a regular basis. And we didn't put any signs up in the yard. We didn't do anything like that because we knew there would be some resistance. And resistance is actually putting it very nicely um, to us moving somewhere else. And I'll never forget one day, we had people come and look at the house, and his mom comes walking in the door and she said, "So, have you had any bites on the house?" And we were like, "What?" Like, I mean, I was just shocked because what did this mean? Like, so she's been like stalking Craigslist to find out that we're selling our house? I mean, it was just, I was in total shock. But thankfully, my husband didn't miss a beat. He was like, "Oh, yeah, we've had a few bites. Yeah, we've had some interest." And I was like, whoa. And I had no idea that this was going to be a new thing now, is that she was going to be stalking us online. So let's see, that was 2010. Fast forward to 2018, I would say. At this point, we have 4 children, and things had kind of gotten better. We did spend quite a bit of years living overseas. And I will say that that gave us the most peace that we had ever had because we knew there was no chance my in laws were going to come strolling up to our house in Costa Rica that did not even have an address. It was one of those towns that I didn't even know they still did this, where it was like your house is, 500 meters from the school. Like that's how people knew where you lived. So that was amazing. That was an amazing time for our family to just pour into our kids, pour into our marriage, pour into ourselves in such a way without having to think about, what are my in-laws going to do? When are we going to have to visit? When are we going to do, all that kind of stuff. So then in 2018, that's the year that we came into the church. And I, I hate to say that it was a coincidence, but it seems as if the attacks got progressively worse at that
Mm-hmm.
point. Maybe it's because we became more aware of it. Maybe it's because the enemy was not too fond of us becoming Catholic. I don't know, but that's how it played out. And in 2018 was the first time that my husband, throughout the years, he had put boundaries in place. We didn't know that they were boundaries. We didn't have that word either. But that was the first time when he went back on something he said. We had been leading into a 90-day deployment that my husband was about to go on to a forward location. Um, and it was going to be dangerous. And we had seen his parents the Thursday and Friday. I think he was leaving on the next Monday or Tuesday. We had seen them. They were going to a marriage conference and just kind of stopped in along the way. And there was an invitation to come by on Sunday for cookies or whatever, just something light. And at this point, with my in laws, I was showing a lot of signs of the physical stress that I was
Mm-hmm.
under. I was having migraines. I didn't realize at that point that I was having severe hormonal imbalances just because of the chronic stress. And so my husband called his dad and he said, "You know what, Dad, I know I invited you for cookies or whatever on Sunday, but I'm going to have to go back on that and ask you not to come." And that evening, that Sunday, my daughter was getting ready to go to work. She walked out the door, "Bye, love you, have fun." And within like 30 seconds, she was back inside the house. And it was like, what happened? Like, what, did you forget something? She said, "No, I just saw my grandparents' vehicle drive down the road." And I was like, "What? No." Like, no, like, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yeah, I know it was them because they had the exact same teal sticker on the back of the car and the same license plates. I know it was them." Now, we lived at that point about 20 miles from the interstate. We did not live on a road that was a through place that anybody would just happen to be driving by. This was a deliberate drive by. And it was at that point that I realized this is really crazy. This is really crazy. Um, Things progressed after that. My husband left for his tour, came back to have our son being baptized. He's the only one of our kids who is baptized Catholic, our youngest. And it was the day before his fifth birthday. And my in laws came. My brother in law was actually the priest who led the Mass for his baptism. And that visit was insanely intense. Up until the point when my in laws drove by after their conference, unexpected, we had made a concerted effort to protect the reputation of my in-laws to our children. I
Mhm.
did not want to be the mom who talked bad about grandma. That was
Mhm.
not going to be me. I had decided that's not what we were going to do. And so we did everything that we thought we could do to protect that relationship so that my in-laws could have a good relationship with my children. That was very naive of me because a child cannot have a good relationship with their grandparents if the grandparents don't have a good relationship with the parents, with their adult children. So that visit around the baptism was it was just super intense. My mother-in-law was next level intense. Like if my daughter went upstairs to her bedroom by herself, my mother-in-law followed. And so I followed. And if my girls went outside for a walk, they wanted to get away from the tension. They took a walk in the neighborhood. Within 30 seconds to a minute, my mother-in-law was outside walking behind them. My husband went down to get it. I mean, it was just a level of intensity that we had never really experienced before. And I was crashing. I was crashing hard. That day, after the baptism, we had lunch at our house, and my husband overheard his parents telling, or his mom specifically, telling our girls that they were practically adults and they could make a decision to go on an international missions trip with her without necessarily asking us. And this was my oldest was not 20, so she was 19 and then 17 and 15-year-old girls telling them this in our kitchen. And my husband immediately knew that was the end. Because
Mhm.
from the time he was young, he had this fear, maybe it was foreknowledge, of the fact that his mom at some point was going to try to turn our kids against us. And there it was happening in our kitchen. At that point, we talked it over. And after everybody left, we decided it's time to go, no contact. I did not also want to be the wife that told her husband, that made a demand that said, we need to cut off contact with your parents. Did I want to? Yes, like 1,000 times. But I knew it had to be my husband's decision because I didn't want to be a controlling wife like I was seeing in his mom. So we did. And to say that things got exponentially worse is a dramatic understatement. And this was February 17th, 2019. And we thought it would just be just a few months that his parents would honor that to give us space. And it exploded. My mother in law she sent a gift for my son, and my husband wrote return to sender on the package, took it to the post office, and sent it back. Well, she got a little more creative. Then she started sending postcards because there's no return address on postcards. She found out that if you order DoorDash, those cannot be returned.
Wow.
So, so we were getting DoorDash Krispy Kreme donuts. I know that that sounds absolutely ridiculous that I would get upset about getting Krispy Kreme donuts, but it was not about the donuts. It was about you told me not to contact you. I'm going to contact you. And now that you have these donuts in your possession that she knew our kids liked, I mean, everybody likes Krispy Kreme donuts. It was a no-win situation for us. If we said, no, you can't have them, then we're the mean parents because we won't let our kids have this special treat from their grandparents. If
Yes.
we do let them have them, then my mother in law wins. She wins because here she is getting to contact our children after we said, don't contact us.
Yes.
Then in 2020, we decided to move. We were very hesitant about putting our house up on Zillow and Realtor.com because of the whole Craigslist thing from 10 years before. And we started getting postcards. Hey, I see y'all are moving. We've moved too. Call us, contact us. And the week that we moved, my in-laws showed up at our house, totally unannounced, totally just out of the blue. And they lived 731 miles away
Oh, wow.
from our house at that point. And I just went into flight mode. We had we lived in Florida, Florida houses, big glass windows, beveled glass. So it wasn't like just plain glass. But I had all the kids run upstairs into the playroom so they couldn't be seen. And I didn't answer the door. And we had a security camera, and my in laws were talking to the security camera. Oh, we just want peace. We just want to talk. We just want to. They came back twice in the first day, twice the next day. And I called police and just to have something on record, just to see what can we do? These people are here unwanted, uninvited, don't want them here. Gosh, then we moved. And when we moved to our new state, we worked with our attorneys when we bought our house to suppress our records. So you couldn't just type in our names online and find our address.
Hmm.
We started receiving Amazon packages in different names to keep our names from being associated with this address. We worked with a private investigator to do all kinds of things to scrub our data off the internet. And for about a year and a half, we had peace. We didn't have to see my in-laws. We didn't talk with them. We didn't have to worry about visits until until June 2022. My husband was home and was on our front porch enjoying some quiet time and a coffee, and he saw a truck drive by very slowly. We are all, every single one of us in my family, are very triggered by quite a few things. Vehicles driving by our home slowly is one of the big ones. And he got his phone ready because, again, we live on a street, not in the main thoroughfare. We're kind of out in the country, and it's a dead end road. And he knew the car had to come back. And when it came back, it looked like there was somebody with binoculars, wearing ball caps, and driving by really slowly. And so he got a picture, and he showed me the picture, and my heart stopped because it was his parents. And he said, they're going to the church.
They could
So,
work for the FBI.
yeah. So we immediately, well, we had already let the church know that we had issues. And being Catholic, if we were still Baptist, we would have been good because they would have not had any idea which church to go to because there's a bajillion Baptist churches near us, but they knew we were Catholic. And so they went to the nearby church, and the director of religious ed had already gotten a heads up from my husband. And then he texted back within like 5 minutes. He said, there's two concerned grandparents here. Can you send a picture? And so I sent a picture from my son's baptism. And he said, yep, that's them. And they tried to paint my husband as the prodigal son, and just basically just badmouth him. And all this time I'm thinking, I cannot believe this. I cannot believe that they have done this. So then we had a hearing date for January of 2023. We worked with an attorney. We decided we've got to do something. We have to do something because my husband, all through this time, now we tried talking it out. We tried letters. We tried anything that we could think of, except we never did joint counseling because I knew that it wasn't going to work. I was not willing to sit down for counseling because I knew based on previous conversations how it was going to go. So that's the one thing we never did. And we were set to have a hearing in January 2023. And we live in the South, and tornadoes do not happen in January, but there was one that day. And we were in the courtroom with my in-laws waiting for our turn when the bailiff handed the judge a piece of paper and he said, we have to evacuate the building. The whole county is evacuating all county buildings because we're under a tornado warning. And it was like, what? Like, what is going on? Then we thought we were protected. Our lawyer had shared that we were protected because we were granted what's called an ex parte protective order. And that means you're granted it's like a restraining order, but in our state, they call them protective orders. Basically, you're granted protection without having to be present. So the judge saw our evidence with a request for a hearing, and he granted it. And our lawyer at the time had said, don't expect it because usually this is for cases of like domestic violence
Mm-hmm.
where physical harm is imminent. But we got it. We had peace during that time because we thought we were protected and my in laws thought we were protected. Fortunately, we were not. But we didn't know that until May 1st. May 1st, drive in for my kids' homeschool co op at a church in a city about 30 minutes away. And I'm pulling in and I see this guy walking. And I was like, wow, that's kind of weird to see somebody in the parking lot at this time of day. And as I get closer, I thought, his gait, the way he walks, looks just like my father in law. I pull in and I happen to drive right by where he was walking. And I glanced over and it was him. And my heart stopped. And then the adrenaline kicked in. And I called 911. I had my son take pictures. And there they were again at a place. This time we live about 8.5 hours away from them. And there they were at what was supposed to be a safe place for me and our children. And there they were. And the next day they came back by our house. And this time was different with the time that we had had to heal. My husband went out and confronted him.
Mm-hmm.
And my second oldest daughter, she's 24, she went up and confronted her grandparents while I called 911. My third oldest went up and confronted them. And then I went up. We basically told them, you're not welcome here. You need to leave. They stayed for over 20 minutes. And then they left when I think they realized that police were coming. And I forgot to say, the day before is when I realized, when I called police, that we did not have any kind of protection. We had no legal protection. But after that, on May 2nd, we got in touch with the lawyer right away. And we just had a hearing. We all each have now a protective order against my father-in-law and my mother-in-law. So there are 10 protective orders in place for our family for the next 12 months. And after that point, we have the opportunity to go back and get that extended. And so that's that's the summary
Wow.
of like the last 30 so years of my life with my in-laws.
Yes. Have you ever gotten to that place where you've asked yourself if it's worth staying?
You know, I would never ever walk away from my husband. Not ever. Have I thought about running away myself? Yeah, a lot. But I know what consequences come with that. Not just, me abandoning my vocation, not me abandoning my family, but the fact that if I were to walk away, then that would leave a huge open door for my in-laws to come in. I mean, this is, before all this stuff since we moved. But knowing that then my kids would have probably unsupervised time with my in-laws. But have I ever thought about leaving? No. Running away? Yes. So it's just a subtle nuance there. But yeah, I mean, it's been, but I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade the, my marriage and my children for anything else because now, even though this is still very raw, this is still a very fresh thing that's going on, God has given me the opportunity to share what has happened with others. And there's a void. Like you said at the beginning, there is a void in especially church circles around this topic. There's a lot of talk about, what to do if your loved one, like your romantic interest is a narcissist, or if they have, whatever. And not that I don't know if my mother-in-law is a narcissist. I don't know. Or there's a lot of content for children whose parents, for like my husband, and there's not really anything about those of us that married into this kind of dysfunction. And so, do I wish things had been different? Absolutely. I wanted that Ruth and Naomi relationship with my mother in law from the very beginning. She was the
Mhm.
first Christian wife and mother that I really had contact with. And it obviously went crazy sideways. But I am thankful that God has given me a chance to use all the trials, use all the suffering for good.
Yeah, I actually want to open space here to kind of give the audience more of an understanding of how that enmeshment and maybe even a definition of what that means. What does enmeshment mean between a mother and a son? And how, when there's a partner, a spouse coming into the relationship, that breaks it open.
My husband kind of refers to it as a different paradigm. So like anything that happens, any email that he got, any phone call, any visit, any comments, any jabs, his default was to think about things the way his parents would see them. So in the instance of my husband, the enmeshment was really a lack of self-identity. He could not be an independent person unless that was the independent person that his parents wanted him to be, if that makes sense. So for the enmeshment, it was I want, and this is speaking as if I were his parents, I want all the details. I want to know who, what, when, where, why, how about everything. And if you have anything that you don't share, then you're keeping secrets. And why are you keeping secrets? What do you have to hide? Those kinds of things. But the biggest thing was just a lack of seeing our family as our own autonomous family unit, just a total disregard for anything that we wanted to do separate from them. It had to be in support of his mom's picture that she had in her mind. And if you went outside from that, then there were consequences.
Yes, I was a teacher for a long time and I taught these students whose parents saw their children as an extension of themselves.
Mm,
And it's very difficult because if you had to give feedback about the child's performance, the parents would take that on.
yes. Yes.
Yes. So I wonder, how did your husband navigate those years while still married to you? And then starting to see, what role did you play in helping him see what was happening?
If you ask my in laws, I am the master manipulator. I have brainwashed our children into thinking that my in laws are anything but wonderful, loving people. It was hard because I walked in to this marriage, and I think we all enter into marriage with ideas and beliefs that we don't really know what they are until we hit the wall. So it was like I remember one of the first things that happened after we were married was we were living in a different state with the military, and his parents wanted to come visit. And I suggested to my husband, why don't we put them up in the hotel room on base? They're super nice, very clean, very safe, very affordable. I mean, back in the early 90s, we're talking like maybe $20 to $40 a night for a very nice room with bedrooms and little kitchenette, the whole shebang. And he brought this up to his parents, and we had already talked about it. We thought that would be great because we couldn't really accommodate his family, but I also wanted the space. And I remember him mentioning it and his mom crying on the other end of the line, sobbing about how she just wanted to come visit her son and they weren't even going to be welcome to stay in his house. My husband caved because that's what a good son does.
Friends, we truly have no idea what motivates other people to do the things that they do. We can, however, look with empathy upon both parties as they try to perhaps meet needs that they are trying to fulfill as adults, that the adults in their own lives failed to meet when they were young. As I listened to this woman's heart, I couldn't help but think about my own mother in law and our relationship. My mother in law never had a daughter, so in that sense, I was blessed. But with every relationship between a daughter in law and a mother in law, there will be differences of opinion and boundaries that need to be set and respected. Most of all, it behooves sons to do the work of separating from their mothers and becoming the men who will keep their spouses as their primary concern after God. Stay tuned next week as we listen to Miriam Susan tell the rest of the story. And until next time, much love. Please be tender with yourself. Forgiveness is serious business. May the grace of the Lord be with you as you contemplate what you learn today. And remember, friends, forgiveness is for you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. But before you go, I want you to know something. If you're feeling exhausted after every family visit, questioning whether you're overreacting, or if you're replaying conversations you had with your in-laws for days afterward, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. I've created a free guide called 5 Signs You're Not Too Sensitive, What Your Gut is Really Telling You, that will help you to understand why these interactions feel so hard and give you some gentle scripts to use in those moments when you're caught off guard by your in-laws. You can grab a copy at desiringpeace.com/signs. That's desiringpeace.com/SIGNS. You're not asking for too much when you ask to be treated with respect. I'll talk to you next week. Disclaimer. All content and information on this podcast and our website, including our programs, products, and/or services, is for information and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional medical, psychiatric, or mental health advice of any kind, and does not establish any kind of professional client relationship by your listening to this podcast or use of my website. A professional client relationship with you is only formed after we have expressly entered into a written agreement with you that you have signed, including our fee structure and other terms to work with you in a specific matter. Although we strive to provide accurate general information, the information presented here is not a substitute for any kind of professional advice, and you should not rely solely on this information. Always consult a professional in the area for your particular needs and circumstances prior to making any professional, medical, or mental health related decisions.